This is, I think the first presentation I did was 3 years ago? Anyway, I did one presentation on Helix. I think it was two. And then I did an update in 2022, which is what you're referring to. And this is my next update. So this is technically update number 2. And I'm gonna, in addition to updating the Helix, I'm gonna update you on some other parts of the layout that I've been working on. I had really building a layout is a very time consuming experience, as some of us can attest to. And when I get into this, I had this big room. And my train room is above my garage. The train room is 25 by 35. It's got a 10-foot ceiling in the train room, but the walls are slanted and sloped. And I think if you're a builder, I think they're 12/10 or something like that. It works out to a 40-degree angle is what the roof is, which is great. Once I found out it was 40 degrees, that helped a lot with building the structure that I needed to support the layout. So yeah, my layout is basically, it starts on the top level down here on Staten Island. I'm not a native Mainer. I'm a native New Yorker. Okay, I grew up in Staten Island, New York. I'm a product of the New York public school system. What can I say? Who was the mayor? John Lindsay was one of the mayors. Anyway, that goes back a long time. Anyhow, so I grew up on Staten Island. I actually took the train back and forth to school, starting in 7th grade when they sent me off to junior high school from PS 42. And I went to junior high school for 2 years, took the train, the Staten Island Rapid Transit, which was run by the B&O Railroad on Staten Island. And I took the train in one direction, northern direction, for junior high school. And then for high school, I went to what's called Tottenville High School. Tottenville is the southernmost burg in New York State, and it's on the tip of Staten Island. So I went to Tottenville High School for 4 years. So I took the train back and forth to school for 6 years. The train was about a third of a mile down my street, the train station. So it was pretty convenient, and they ran at all hours of the day and night. But anyway, so whoa, here we go again. Fingers to be talking here. I grew up here in Staten Island. Those of you that have ever driven on the wonderfully picturesque New Jersey Turnpike, you'll remember, and they're getting away from a lot of it now. A lot of it's been torn down, but many years ago when I was growing up in the 60s, it was just nothing but oil refineries. Okay, constant oil refineries everywhere for miles and miles. And used to be a lot of wharfs and oil transfer stations and oil barges and all kinds of tankers coming in on the Arthur Kill and the Kilvan Cove, which are the two waterways around Staten Island. So my layout starts with an oil refinery area up here, and then for those of you that are familiar with this area of New Jersey right in here, there's a lot of railroading in that area of New Jersey. A lot. There's tracks everywhere. I ignore all that on my railroad, and I will have the Staten Island the lift bridge that goes from Elizabeth over into Staten Island. That's going to be modeled on my layout, and I'm going to model a portion of Staten Island where the Con Ed power plant is. But other than that, my layout goes right up over here. It's Selkirk, New York, the Selkirk yard is probably the largest train yard on the East Coast. And it's where everything coming into New England goes through, everything. And so I'm gonna do my best to model that on the upper level. And then I go across into West Springfield. And from West Springfield, I go through Palmer. There's the CV interchange there with the Central Vermont. And as you can tell, my layout is Conrail in 1976. So that's what Conrail was from. Then on to Worcester. Then from Worcester to Providence, we have the Providence and Worcester Railroad. And then from Providence, I go along the shoreline back into Oak Point Yard in the Bronx. Oak Point Yard in the Bronx is where all the fruit and perishable items used to come into New York City in those days. I don't know how they do it now, but anyway, so that's kind of a quick thing. This is the upper level of the layout. The oil terminal is right here, Elizabeth. This is my Selkirk yard. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit different than what I got it drawn in here. This is going to be Staten Island, the Con Ed power plant, and it's an intermodal yard there. This is where the lift bridge is going to be. This will be the water area here. This is the Hudson River Bridge that goes over the Hudson River. If you've driven along the Mass Pike on Interstate 90 and through New York, you can see the bridge right there on the left. So I have a kit for that. And again,
how tall is your level? The height?
The lower level is 3 levels. Lower level is 24 inches off the floor. Middle level is 44 or something. And then the upper level is 58. 42, the middle level is 42. Upper level is 58 inches. And that's something I meant to put in this presentation was a cutout, a side cutout view, so you could get a sense for that. This diagram isn't done so much. This is my stairs right here. Go down to the lower level, and this is where the Helix is located right there. This I got to redraw because Springfield is going to be more over here. Palmer is going to still be right there, and right in here, I'm going to have Brattleboro Yard in Brattleboro, Vermont. I got to have some place to stage the items that come off the Central Vermont, and so that's where that's going to be. Okay. Again, just this is the lower level. At this point, with as much time as it's been taking me, I'm not sure I'm going to get to the middle level. But this is what the plan is. I will get to New London right here, coming off the Helix. The rest of this, I'm not sure. Cedar Hill Yard in New Haven, Stamford, Connecticut, Oak Point Yard in the Bronx. Stamford may just turn into be a train station. It's a pretty extensive one in Stamford. I'm not sure how much of that I'll build, but we'll see. So the last time I gave an update, that's what it looked like. Briefly, the Helix it's an octagonal Helix. It's got 24 half-inch diameter threaded rods, 36 inches. Each one of these is 3 feet long. The ones over here by the slanted ceiling are cut off because they're too tall. And that's just the way you got to do that. And I'll explain about this as I get into it. But this is above the stairwell. This is the stairwell area right here. When you have a 3-level layout and you have one Helix, you have an issue where how are you going to come off the Helix on the middle level and get back onto it? So essentially what you have is you have 2 Helixes on top of each other. One on top of the other is what you got. And so you go down from, if you start at the top level, you go down the first half of the Helix onto the middle level, Then you run your train around the whole middle level of the layout to the other side of the helix. You get back onto the helix to get down to the lower level. That's how it's supposed to work. You'll notice, I'll get into it. So just basically as a review, this is what it looked like before I started. There was an empty space right here. This is again the stairwell underneath here. What you have to do, you got to make each one of these sections. The sections are made out of 5/8 inch birch. They call it Russian birch. It's birch plywood. It's really heavy, stiff, extremely laminated plywood. I think there's 9 plies in that 5/8 of an inch. So I got a good deal on it from the guy who made my kitchen cabinets. So I couldn't refuse that. And then you got to figure out how much space it's going to take up and how you're going to support it. So I wanted this to be 6 foot in diameter, basically. That gives me, and it's double tracked. So that gives you a 34-inch radius on the outer loop and a 31.5 radius on the inner loop, which is good enough for anything that's made that runs. So that's good. Again, I had to make this support. The other thing I should mention, the floors on my layout are laminate hardwood floors. It's a floating floor. You know, you put down plastic, you put down a little thin layer of styrofoam or whatever it is you're going to put down there. Then you start in one corner and you just kind of snap the sections together. You got to do some cutting, of course, because they don't always work out right. You want to stagger all these things. But my son and I laid this in about 2 days. It took us to get the floor laid. So when you have a floating floor, my point when I designed the layout, I wanted to have as little of the weight of the layout on the floor, because the purpose of the floor is supposed to flex a little bit. It's supposed to move based on what the interior temperature and humidity conditions are in the room. So that's the whole purpose of a floating floor. So I designed this thing here. These are all basic 2x4s with the little metal things that carpenters use to attach to butt wood ends next to each other. So it's no big deal. You can buy those in any hardware store. This is the middle level of the layout right here. This part of the layout is just, I guess they call it open grid construction. That's all that is. It's just a framework and half-inch plywood right here. I don't like to use 3/4 inch plywood. A lot of guys do, but I don't like to use it because it's heavy. It's really hard. It's hard to cut. It's hard to lift. It's hard to transport. It's just hard to use 3/4 inch plywood. So I don't use it. Okay. If I need something stiff, then I'll make some braces underneath to support it properly so that it doesn't flex, because 1/2 inch plywood can flex significantly. So that's what I do. Next. Again, you gotta come up with a support thing. I took out all of the math that you have to do to build a helix, because I don't want to go through it right now. We don't have time. But basically, you got to figure out what your slope is, and on this one, it's 2.2%. You need to know how to change the slope in percent into degrees, because when you cut wood on your miter saw and stuff that you need to know that to set the settings on the miter saw. So this is 1.2 degrees, and you can do all that math, or you can buy a Craftsman level that has a laser on it and everything else, and it does the conversion for you right there. Just punch buttons. That's good. One thing that happens as you get into this is you start to get your collection of tools and clamps. Clamps, oh man. Clamps are the greatest thing since sliced bread as far as building a layout is, okay? They don't talk back to you. They don't give you ideas as to how you could do it better. Okay? They don't complain that how much longer do I have to hold this? Okay? You don't get any of that from a clamp. Okay, clamp is just great, and the clamp will hold that thing forever. Okay, so yeah, the clamps are good, and I use a lot of them on this thing. You can see these 2x4s here. That's basically the base of what it went around, and I made some supports here. When I first started to put this together, I went online to see if there was any videos of guys who made helixes. And this one guy who was using threaded rod like me, and I said, oh, I got to watch this. So I was watching it. When he was all done with it, the rods were all bent and they were in different angles and stuff like that. So I went and called him a master model railroader, who shall remain nameless. And I said, how the hell do you do that? Okay. So this is how you do it. You got to make the whole, you got to make all the sections. Each one of these sections, there's 8 sections, you got to make them. And then I put 4 of the sections together at a time to make a half section. And then you put all of the half sections together and you put everything right one on top of each other. And you get one of these wonderful clamps that I talked about. Okay, this thing quit on me. You get one of the wonderful clamps and you clamp the whole thing down so it's steady. And then once you've laid out where you want the holes for the rods, you get that nice device on the right there with your drill and you drill the freaking hole right through all the way from the top to the bottom, drill through all the different sections of wood. That's how you get the opportunity to keep your rods straight. Okay. Because as you build this thing and you go up, it moves, okay, a little bit, but it's going to move. It's not going to be perfectly straight, but that's the nature. If you ever done a spring and you'll notice the ends on the spring change position as you pull it up and pull it down. This is the same theory. Okay. Anyway.
Batteries.
I probably ran out of batteries. Anyway, so I'm going to talk. I'm going to keep talking.
This where you're at. Back up.
Okay.
Back up.
All right. So you start, you gotta lay roadbed. I'm not one of those guys who likes to just lay track on wood. I don't like to do that. It not only is it noisy, but it's just kind of need a pad of some kind. So I just added regular cork, you know, the kind you can buy that's pre-done. And so this is cork, it's gone in there. And on top of the cork is the track. I did not ballast the track. You don't need to do that in a Helix. Nobody's going to look in there, supposedly. And the other thing you have to do on this thing, you got to do the wiring at the same time. Okay. There's 5 inches of space between one layer of track and the next layer of track. So that gives me about 4¼ inches of clearance, which is plenty. Okay, a lot of people have less than that, but I that's what I chose to do. Next slide. So here we are, we're putting this thing on. Oh, there we go. Okay. You'll notice I got blocks of wood in here as I'm building this thing up. You also notice that I had to put these rods in. Again, you can't build it up too far before you with a slope ceiling. The top of the rod hits the ceiling when you try and put it in the hole. So that doesn't work. So you got to put it in as soon as you can. Okay. And then each time you put a section in, you got to carefully set it down on top of that rod. But again, so here we're doing this. you can't see this up here, but I think this is 2022 on these calendars. Okay, and again, I'm just trying to bring it back to where we were for last time. You'll see the wiring right here. I decided to put the wiring right up next to the track. And so I soldered all the feeders and everything in right there. The main trunk wire goes down here into a bus area. Next slide. Here we are again. Roadbed. I use push pins to hold the roadbed after I glue them down. Use what's that stuff? I can't think of it. I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, tools everywhere. I paint as I go. Next slide. So this is kind of what it looked. I got to this point, and you'll notice that this level. See now I've got the rods in, and I thought when I put these rods in that I was going to have to spend like a week threading all of these nuts onto the rods, and it went much faster than that. It's not really that big of a deal. So I got some of them in. I don't have all of them in. The ones over here by the slants, the slope ceiling, those are all in because I had to do it then. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got the rods in. So you reach the middle. When you reach the middle level, you got to get, okay, how am I going to get off the middle level and off the helix and onto the middle level? Next slide. So that's what I've done here. Just extend it right on a piece of plywood right off the edge, right there. And each one of these sections, by the way, I use a joiner, a plate joiner, to do all that with. They call them biscuits, the biscuit joiner, and screws. Use the Craig system. You see it in the hardware store all the time. So this is the back of the layout that goes around on the middle level, and here's where you get off the helix. Next slide. This is a different shot of it. I spent a lot of time on this ladder, and this is one of those ladders that you can extend both sides of it. So it's really very helpful. And this goes on to the layout that goes with the track that goes around, and it comes right off here and right onto this. And you have to have enough space to do it gradually. When you're running 85-foot cars on a layout, you can't, and you're going from one slope to the next, you've got to really have a long gradual period where you do that over. Okay, you can't just do it drastically, otherwise you're going to have problems. Next slide. So this is what it looks like. You can see I removed all the tools and everything. Yeah, we're April of 22, and then I had to get the roadbed down. The roadbed on the Helix is cork. This other roadbed here, it's a different color. That is cork, but that's sheet cork. Okay, that's the stuff that people who put carpets down, they use it in sheets, and then they'll put the carpet on top of it. Okay, I got several rolls of that. Two thicknesses, one's 3 mils and one's 6 mils, I believe. This is the 6 mil stuff, and there's some 3 mil stuff up here as well. But anyway, next slide. So now we get to the point where we've got this connected here, and so I extend this up. Now you'll notice there's only one track here. This is supposed to be a 2-track layout. I had to put in one track so I could cheat. Okay, if I wanted to stage a train from the upper level and I needed it staged on the lower level, I didn't want to have to run around the middle level to get from one section of the helix to the other. So I can cheat. I can go from the top to the bottom of the helix if I use the inner track, and that's what this is. So now that I got this fitted, I took this off here and removed it. Go ahead, next slide. I didn't take it off yet. It's obvious that it's, what you have to do is you got to have a place on the other side of the helix where the middle level is being connected to. So that's what this is. This is the new thing. I'm working on this right now. This is where a board's gonna come off. Next slide. There it is right there. That comes off of here. This is the next section of the layout. The middle level of the layout is done with L girder construction. Okay, I wanted to be able to have those sections so that I could remove them. I could work on them and then put them in. Again, because the ceiling is sloped. Okay, it's very difficult to work back in here, laying track and ballast and scenery and everything else. Next slide. So this is what it looks like now. Okay, a lot has happened. I did all this winter. You'll notice this turnout is in right here. That goes on the workaround on the for the middle level. This is a smale. I love smales. Have any of you put them on your layouts yet? Slow motion actuator with integrated logic. I think that's what the acronym stands for. Instead of a tortoise, I would highly recommend these. I had to install it on the top instead of the bottom. You don't want to, if you got to work on something on a Helix, you don't want to have to work on it. You only got like 4¼ inches in there of space. So I put it on the top where I could see it and work on it and everything if something goes wrong. You'll notice that I got painted backdrops here. These backdrops are white masonite board that you can buy in Home Depot. And then I painted it blue. And the painting technique is the dab technique that there's a guy from Canada who
Chris Lyons.
Yeah, Chris Lyons. He does a wonderful job with it. And I looked at his videos at least a dozen times when I got to certain set to see how he did it and everything. But I'm really thrilled with the way it came out, especially once I added these painted trees, and they were easy to do. And once I added those trees, it just gave the whole thing depth. It really did. And it's going to be hard to see on these slides, but you can see I've got ballast. The track is down. The ballast is down. The ballast I use is real rock. It's from Arizona Rock and Mineral. It's very, very good stuff. And you were talking about shipping stone, Jim. Whenever I order a package of this from them, it comes into the post office, and my postmaster, Lynn, she'll say to me, "What the hell is in this thing anyway? This feels like rocks." And I go, "It is rocks." That's exactly what it is. It's rock. And anyway, so there's actually 3 types of ballast here. This is supposed to be New York Central stuff. This is supposed to be Pennsylvania stuff. It's supposed to be a little more gray. And this is both Conrail East, and it's also the same stuff that the Cumbridge and Toltec is supposed to use. They call it the same thing. I particularly don't care for this because when it's lit up, this is really bright. So I'm gonna have to dull it down somehow. Maybe I can spray some India ink wash on it, something like that. But I got to dull it down because it's really too bright. This is what happened to me. I'm not one of those guys who, if you're building something and people are only going to see 3 sides of it, so that means you don't have to do anything to the backside. I'm not one of those people. Okay, I may not do the backside of a structure the same way I do the front side and the sides, but I'm going to do something. Okay, it's not going to be, unfinished totally. And I felt the same way about the layout going behind the Helix. I mean, it's the layout behind the Helix. Nobody's going to see it or look at it that much because the Helix is going to be in the way. And I said, well, what am I going to do? I got to do something. I just can't have track on roadbed on plywood. That just doesn't look good to me. So I said, I'll do a little bit. So I painted, and then after I painted, I decided, well, maybe should I put ballast down or not? I decided I'd put ballast down. Because I had some of this New York, I just wanted to try it and see it. So I put it down, I wound up putting the ballast down. As I got into it, I started doing a little bit more and a little bit more. And eventually I seen it, the whole damn thing. And it still needs some work, but if I didn't, I had to do it now because as I got up more layers, I wouldn't be able to get in there and work. Oh, and the other thing is, when you have track behind a Helix like that, don't put turnouts back there, okay? Don't do that, all right? Just keep it plain and simple. Track, straight track or curved track, and make sure the track, when you put it down, is clean. Make sure there's no burrs. Make sure everything is perfect, because something's going to go wrong back there, okay? Eventually. Next slide. So this is the other side of it. I wound up putting in, trees, shrubs, ground cover. Like I said, I got to dull this down a lot. This is too bright to me. And I'll do that before I go much higher. Wound up putting a little bit of a safety thing here, the fascia on that. I just love the next slide. I just love the way it came out, even in the corner. This is the very corner. I put a little bit, these are three, it's supposed to be springtime, 1976. That's when Conrail went into existence. So this is an apple tree. These are 3 cherry trees. And again, this is just commercially bought stuff. I'm experimenting with scenery right now. That's what I'm doing. So, and it came out really, really nice. I was very surprised. This is one of my better locomotives. This is a Bowser Alco C630. That I weathered severely. Next slide. Again, this is what it looks like. It's a little bit more finished now, but you can see the front on this. I went back and forth on this shade of green for that thing. Tom, the first shade of green I picked out was raw. I got it in the store, painted it, and I'm like, oh, I hate that. And anyway, it's hard to pick it out. Next slide. We're back at this thing without the train, and I'm gonna put some more stuff in the middle here and around the edges of the track. Yeah, it came out. I'm tickled with it. Next slide. That's kind of the whole thing right there in the corner. That's a little bit more than just paint and everything else. But I have to tell you, I had a ton of fun doing it. It was so nice to be doing some scenic things other than, carpentry work and track. It was so nice. You can see right here, the wiring that I have to each layer. I didn't just daisy chain the wire all the way around. I have a separate wire for each layer of this. There'll be a total, right down here, will be a total of about 7 wires. And they all go to one of those terminal things. So that's how I did it. Next slide. Oh, okay. So after that's done, okay, I put the next layer on. Added this thing here, and we're moving up. And okay, this is what it looks like today. Okay, I took this just the other day. I've got this track is in the turnout here, and the track goes on to this level right there. You can see the upper level right here, middle level here, and the lower level is down there. Okay, right here, rather. Okay, those are the 3 levels. That's what it looks like today. That's where I am. I have the Helix will finish. I got another 2 layers to go before it attaches to this, and it will finish. It will get to its highest point right about here, 2 levels up. My original plan was to put a power plant on top of this thing. I don't know if I'm going to do that or not right now. Many of you may remember the Mount Tom power plant along the Connecticut River in Massachusetts. That's what I wanted. It's gone now. So I don't know if I'm gonna do that now or not, but. So that's where the Helix is, and, it's, like I said, I made a lot of progress with it. Again, when you get to the middle level, you got all these things to do. You have the entrance and the exits to the Helix. So you gotta kind of have those things planned out. Okay, and I didn't really have that planned out well. Next slide. This is what it's looking like right now. Brattleboro Yard is going to be right in here. If you look closely, you can see the drawings I have. The lines, the track lines on here. Going to have 4-track yard right there. The board that comes off the Helix that's right over here is actually going to connect to that board, which is raised up right there. So, and then this will go on to the next section. Next slide. This is a little closer up look of it. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this connection right here, but I'll come up with something. Next slide. This is from the opposite end. These are number 5 turnouts on this end. This is a curved turnout, number 7. That's a number 6. This is a curved turnout, number 7. These are Pico turnouts, by the way. This is a number 5, and that's a Y. That Y is not going to be there. Next slide. Okay, we're done with that. Any questions on the Helix and where I am? Okay. Next slide. This is the oil refinery area, and I got to move along quickly because I'm just running through my time here. One of the issues, I decided to put a photo backdrop up here because it's an oil refinery area. Okay, I know the only way I could think of to do it would be to have a photo backdrop. That just makes too much sense to me. So I got in touch with Bill Brown at Lark Products. You all know Bill, most of you do, and I operate on his layout every year usually. And I went and saw him, and we worked together on his computer and came up with something. One of the problems you have with a slope ceiling is this is the wiring for my lighting, which is right here. And I had to do something. You can't just put a backdrop over that stuff. So I came up with a plan. Next slide. And I got some outside corner molding from the local lumber yard and did some cutting. Again, the slope of the roof here is 40 degrees. That made it kind of easy to make a 40-degree cut here and a 50-degree cut there. So that all worked out. And I covered this over and that took care of the wiring. Next slide. This is part of the backdrop. Basically, you put this on, you tape it up, you tape it in position with painter's tape, and then you start over here on this side. You peel back the backing. You put it on carefully, smoothly. Then you take the tape off, and then you start peeling off sections of the backing. You cut them off and you do a small, it's very time consuming. You have to be patient with it. I'm going to pass this around. This is what this stuff is. This is it's called Fabtex polyester. The nice thing about this, it's got a self-adhesive. And the other thing is, if you screw up, you can remove it and redo it. Okay. The bad thing about it is it can stretch if you're not careful with it. When you put it up, it can stretch. The problem I had is that I'm not putting it on a flat vertical wall. It's going up a slope ceiling. So I had to do it from the bottom, and I needed some help to do it. So my buddy Carter Sawtell came over, and the two of us did it. Next slide. That's what it looks like after it got installed. I had to do some cutting out, but I did it. It came out pretty well. Next slide. That's kind of what it looks like when it got done. Now that it's done, go ahead. Next slide. This is what it was told. The whole thing totaled about 13 feet long, I think this is. It came in 3 pieces. He sent it to me and it rolled up to me. But I got this on. These are the nicest shots of this thing. You can't see one thing about this is the fab text is thin. Every little imperfection that you have in the surface that you're applying it to, you're going to see that. Especially in a big area, a blue area like the sky. So a lot of guys, what they do if they're using this fab text for their backdrop, especially if it's just trees or mountains, they won't order the sky. They'll paint the sky themselves, paint the clouds themselves, and then just Bill will cut out the mountainous portions, and then you just put those up, and you won't see it as much because the stuff is darker. The mountains are darker. It's a darker color. Next slide. That's a little bit higher elevation of it. Next slide. Again, I threw some oil tank cards there. In this shot, I've got my lighting on, and I have to tell you right now, I don't like it. Okay. I don't like it. I don't like the way this light comes down on this at all. I just don't like it. So I've got to come up with another plan. So I'm trying to think through that. I'm thinking I may have to put some track lighting up here and from a different angle.
Bring that out a few inches.
Yeah, I got to do something. I can't leave it like this because I just don't like it. This is dark and in the shadows here, and I got to find some way to lighten that up in this area. Next slide. Again, you can see it's kind of dark here. You can see a few little imperfections here. Those are areas where I screwed up. I did the best I could to sand some of these areas, but again, you're putting this, you're using this, you're putting it up, you're going to see imperfections that are underneath. Next slide. Questions? Wow, I'm done. Holy cow. Okay. And I'm only, what, 10 minutes late? Anyway, yes, sir.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never seen Helix as thought out, so, but I like the emphasis on it's sort of all trial by error in a sense, and not the, and the same thing is don't be afraid to tear it up and start it over. I think that's one of the hardest things. And what I really like that's very inspiring, I think, even on a smaller layout, that you've gone in and say, hey, look at experimenting. And it's like, it's not carved in stone. If you don't like it, you got to get rid of it. And I really appreciate you emphasizing that. Yeah,
it's the one thing I didn't go through is, which I did 3 years ago when I first did this presentation, was there's math that's involved in this. Okay, one of the things I like the threaded rod is because you can adjust those, you can adjust everything. It's all adjustable. When you're running long cars or you're running 6-axle locomotives in consists and stuff like that, track work is really, really, really important. Okay. And you've got to have your transitions from flat to going into an elevated portion of track. That's got to be really thought out and planned well when you're having long cars, because the coupler height changes when you're going up a slope. There's a lot of things that can change, especially in a Helix. So the threaded rod gives you the option of doing it exactly. Once I got to the point in the middle of the level where I was, I had to go back. I took like I said, I have an 11-inch long Craftsman that tells me how much slope it is and everything else. I went around that on each section and adjusted the nuts and got it so that it was all level. And right now, if anything derails on that, I'm going to shoot myself. But it really helps, and that's what you have to do when you're running stuff like that. Again, I'm not the only one who said this. If you're spending time on a layout and you want to focus on one area, focus on your track. And that's where you got to focus. Okay.